Yo, what's going on, guys? It's been a while since I've done anything about Sorc PvE, and a lot has changed since the reboot with Awakening PvE, so I wanted to revisit the Awakening spec and kind of give a rundown on what you can expect and how you should be really using your new skills in the rotation for PvE with Awakening. So the biggest change coming out of Reboot for Awakening Sorc is going to be the change that they made to Violation, where it now has damage reduction on cooldown, so you will be doing a significant amount of damage less while using Violation while it is on cooldown, so you're gonna have to use alternatives to Violation to basically have more filler instead of just doing a pre-buff rotation and then doing a few spins of Violation. Change though coming out of PvE or just the reboot in general was Soul Harvest. So Soul Harvest now gives a 5% cast speed buff while casting it. The same cast speed buff does also apply with claws, but in Awakening grinding you're pretty much going to be using Soul Harvest just because it does do a little bit of damage as well. So this is another really good change that they did do for the class in PvE despite the nerfs to Violation. So before we get into actual skill rotation and maybe different skill rotations you might want to use depending on your add-ons, we should be looking at add-ons and kind of how you want to be using them and why. So first and foremost, Bloody Calamity is a great PvE skill. It is one of our two T3 add-ons, like I've mentioned before in my previous PvE and PvP guides, and it is a great way to, even despite being a long cooldown, get a huge buff to damage, so you want to be using this off cooldown. Soul Harvest, like I mentioned earlier, is going to be an insane buff because you get the cast speed as well as proccing add-ons on top of it very quickly. The other four skills these are mainly for orcs and just generic grind spots that aren't too accuracy or DP reliant. Stuff like orcs, anything in Elvia, Stars End, Sacria, Histria, all these different grind spots basically on the mainland that aren't involving Odraxia. So these skills are pretty much what you're going to be using. You don't really need to use Karshan's Nightmare in these areas because you don't really get a whole lot of value out of it. So GRJ, an obvious choice of skill add-on. Swirling Darkness, another skill that is a great addition with the reboot. Violation, of course, one of our core skills, and Soul Reaper, which is a good flow. So running down the list of these skills and how they work, Soul Harvest, you're going to be getting a nice cast speed buff just from the passive skill, and now on top of it, add-ons as well. GRJ, you don't need to have any critical hit on because it already does have 100% critical hit rate, so you're just going to be doing minus DP and more damage to monsters. These are optional, whether or not you want to add these exact same skill add-ons, and maybe you want to change them a bit depending on how you want to do your skill rotation. This is based on what I use for mine. So I recommend similar add-ons, maybe just in a different order depending on how you want to use them. So I'm going to be showing you what my skill rotation looks like, about what I do for my PvE, and it may look a little bit different for you. You can change it how you want. Like I said, it can depend on add-ons and how you want to be using them, but I use my add-ons based on how I do my skill rotation, and I find that I like this one the best. So I start by opening with Soul Harvest. You can use the shift Q whether in your Awakening or main hand and it will take you into Awakening. And depending on whether or not the mobs need to group or not, I'll use Vileplan if they are taking some time to group. If they're not, I'll go right into GRJ, into Violation, get behind the mobs, and then do Swirling and Soul Reaper for those back attacks, which is why I have back attacks on Swirling. So I like this rotation the best, and maybe you find that you like doing Soul Harvest into Swirling, into Violation, then GRJ, Soul Reaper. You can just mix it up a little bit based on what you like. It is up for debate whether you want to do what you want to do. So that's just what I personally use and find the best for me. The biggest thing to take away is that you want back attacks very, very badly. So that's why I usually just use one spin of Violation to get behind the mobs. Then we'll do skills. Sometimes depending on my cooldowns, I'll use maybe GRJ after Violation before I'm behind, depending on what I have available. But the main skills you're going to be looking at is Grim Reaper's Judgment, Swirling, Soul Reaper. Sometimes I'll throw in Engulfing Shadow. I'll use Vileplan quite a bit. It just depends on what my cooldowns are looking like. Now you do want to also be using Bloody Calamity and IDOD, just basically off cooldown whenever you can, just to get that T3 out on and a little bit of extra damage, just because you can cancel IDOD so quickly out of Bloody Calamity. So those are the add-ons that I basically use for my average grind, whether I do Orcs, Bloody Monastery, sometimes Stars End, Underwater, but the places that don't need anything too special to grind them. So looking at what I'd use for Oluns, Crypt, although I haven't attempted Crypt at the moment, they're going to be a bit different just because you do need more accuracy, and so you can shred their high evasion. So a bit changed here. We take out the Violation and I replaced it with Cartians just because I want that extra T3 add-on for more back attack damage. It's very important for pushing DPS on golems to get the arm. It's important for just getting the extra boost. Instead of 7% attack cast speed or 3% back attack damage, now you're getting 5% and 10% respectively. For the most part, the other skills are the same. The add-ons change a little bit. I get more accuracy on Soul Harvest. I want more back attack and crit damage on my GRJ, and as well minus evasion and minus DP for Soul Reaper, since DP and evasion is massive for places like Oluns and Crypt where they have an insane amount of defensive stats that you need to burn through. I'm not running any defensive add-ons for my grind spots just because I trusted myself to be smart with my grind and not die very often. So you may find yourself maybe being a bit squishy or dying, and if you do, you could always beef one of these skills up, like Bloody Calamity maybe, with some DP if you do find that you are, you know, maybe dying too much, or even change the way that you buff. So buffing in PvE is going to look the same at most areas, maybe outside of Ash Forest, Crypt, and Oluns, where you'd probably use an elixir rotation with a group, or if you're party or solo grinding. Everywhere else, I'm pretty much using the same thing everywhere, unless I'm doing maybe Stars In, where I don't really want to min-max super hard and I'm just lazy and will pop a Giant's Drought. But everywhere else, I usually use a Frenzy Drought with a Spirit Perfume Elixir. Now with the release of Jade Forest, I do have a ton of the new Spirit Perfume Elixirs that add 5% or 5 monster damage, so I use those instead. But outside of that, it's really just Frenzy and Spirit Perfume. Now this can be a little bit risky if you are on the lower DP end at places maybe like Gaif and Temple, or just if you have lower DP, then maybe it's recommended for the grind spot. So if that is the case for you, you might find yourself using either a Giant or even a Beast to be extra safe, as well as paired with a exquisite cron meal, or sorry, simple cron meal. There are places like Oluns where it is more damage to run exquisite cron meals for more back attack and special attack damage. This is up to you again, whether you want to be worried about min-maxing trash loot, or if you want to not worry about dying as much if you are worried about that. So the core skill options are pretty much the same even after Reboot, and those two options are still going to be your Violation and Dead Hunt. Violation giving you forward guard when you use it off of cooldown, and Dead Hunt the same exact thing, forward guard when it is off cooldown. It's really just a preference thing. I know people who really like Violation more, I know people who really like Dead Hunt more. Basically, you can pick both to try it out and see what you like more after that. I personally prefer Violation, but I know people who prefer Dead Hunt, so really just up to you after testing it. Our movement is still pretty much the same with Reboot. We did get a bit of movement buffs with Wings of the Crow becoming a whole new skill and getting some range addition to it, as well as Rushing Crow still being an option. So the movement is still going to be like Shadow Leap into Wings, into Dark Flame. You could do Engulfing Shadow. You can even throw in some pre-awakened iframes to move from pack to pack. You don't really have to worry about stamina too much, just we have so many options that we can use, like Dark Flame even off of, or on cooldown, just because we're not really worried about getting CC'd or anything like that. We just want to get from pack A to pack B as quickly as possible. It's also worth mentioning that if you are grinding Elvia, you might not know whether to grab the Awakening weapon or the main hand weapon. And basically, the rundown is, if you want to use the Awakening Elvia skill, which is right here called Belated Awareness, you need to grab the Awakened weapon. Now, I've tried plenty hours of using main hand and the Awakened weapon, and I still think the main hand weapon is going to be better for you. You don't get to use your Elvia skill, even though it is kind of nice and will insta-shot a pack. I just think overall your damage is much better with the main hand, but you can again try both, see if you really like that Awakening skill and you like the way it feels, then you can run both. Sorc PvE isn't going to be the absolute best thing you can pick up as a grinder. There are obviously better options like there is in any form of game, where there are going to be the best options, the mid-tier options, and I still think Sorc has potential to be a pretty decent grinder. It just will take a little bit more effort than things like Sucklon maybe, but I think with enough effort and practice, you can really perform well in this class if you just really commit to it and don't mind having to put in a little bit more work. So that is going to be it for me for today. I do plan on releasing grind zone specific areas, whether that be Oryx or Bloody Monastery, what have you. But I do want to go more in depth with those at a later time. This is more just a generic where to get started with Sorc PvE after the reboot and kind of what you can expect, because it is a bit different with the violation change. It did change a lot, but just be patient with yourself. It is going to take some time to push what other even Sorcs are pushing or other classes, but just be patient, practice if you want to really commit to grinding on this class. It does have a learning curve, but if you keep at it, you will be able to get better and better. So don't try not to be too hard on yourself and make it too unfun for yourself. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If you do have any more questions, feel free to leave a comment, hit me up on Discord. You can also join the Sorc Discord I can leave in the description. They do have a lot of helpful people there that are willing to help you and get you the information that you may need. So take it easy guys, hope you enjoy.